to a very special edition of the Piano Men with Stanley Carr. You're in for a very special treat tonight. I am very pleased to welcome Billy Kuttenkuler to the show this evening. Billy graduated from Berklee College of Music in 1985 with a BA in Jazz Composition and Arranging. He spent the next several years as a backup vocalist and keyboard player, working with the likes of the Hudson Brothers, Cher, and Barry Manilow. Billy left Los Angeles for Nashville in 1994, where he started composing, arranging, and directing music for several clients around the country. In 2007, he began teaching music at Currey Ingram Academy in Brentwood, Tennessee. Billy left the school in 2016 and is now living in Fort Wayne, Indiana, after spending the last few years in North Dakota. Welcome to the show, Billy.
Hey, good to be here.
Yeah, of course. Definitely wanted to have you on. We've got a lot to talk about, a lot to catch up on. I haven't seen you in so long, and you've got a brand new musical that we're going to talk about later in the show. But I wanted to talk about your upbringing and childhood first. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in upstate New York, in Elmira, New York.
Elmira?
Yep, small town just above the Pennsylvania border in the Finger Lakes region. So, near Ithaca, if you know New York, or south of Syracuse, pretty far from the city, like 3-4 hours from the city.
I graduated about a year and a half ago from SUNY Oswego, so that's...
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
my sister went. That's where my sister went.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What'd she major in?
In psych.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful campus. Gorgeous campus. I mean, it's right by the lake. It's right by the lake, one of the Great Lakes.
Yep.
And, so that's awesome. So Elmira, tell me a little bit about your family life. What was it like growing up in the home? Did you come from a musical background? What made you want to pursue music?
That's interesting. My mother told me that when I was a little guy, maybe like 4, 5, 6 years old, that I would hum along with the commercials on the TV. Or my mother loved big band music, so she'd have big band records playing and I'd be humming along, and she'd like look at me and go, wow, he's humming along to this music. And that's my earliest memories. But my mom was musical. My father couldn't carry a bucket in a tune, but he loved music. Oh, he loved dancing and going out and enjoying music, but he was not musical himself.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I started playing in bands when I was 13 years old, making money out there. And I was in a band with he was like the mentor of a bunch of musicians that came out of my hometown. He had a blues band, and I got into his blues band when I was 13. And, started playing clubs and having a great time learning how to play music.
That's amazing. So when did you know for sure, like, this is what I wanted to do for a living?
I was pretty sure that I knew that I wanted to be in music when I was about 17, just turned 17. I thought that was the case. It was kind of tough because during high school, I didn't really like high school a lot. So I did a program where I could get out in 3 years instead of 4.
Okay.
Because I knew I didn't want to be there.
Sure.
Yeah. Exactly. So I did. I doubled up 1 year, and I knew I either wanted to do sports or music because I love sports at the same time. And I don't know, my last year there in school, I got some more opportunities in music than I did in sports. And I just kind of followed my nose, and long story short, a drummer from my hometown who did very well for himself out in California. He worked with the Carpenters. He's an amazing drummer. He came back to my hometown when I was, what would be my senior year. I was really a junior. And I heard him play in a club one night, and I actually borrowed, quote unquote, my father's car and went to the club to watch him play. Wow. And I was just blown away because he played like Steve Gadd. And I'd never heard anybody play like that before. And I was just enthralled. So I kept asking my dad, can I go back and see him? Can I go back and watch this band? And he was like, yeah, go for it. So I kept going back to watch him. And, then I actually sat in with them a couple of times, his band. And he got to, start talking to me about the road and what it was like and all this stuff. And unbelievably so, right after I graduated, like a month afterwards, he came up to me at one of the clubs I was watching him play, and he said, "Hey, I'm putting together a band to go on the road, backing up an old 50s group called the Flamingos." He said, "Would you be interested in being in the band?" And I was like, "Yeah." You're going to pay me to play music? Sure. Absolutely. So that's how it started.
I've definitely heard of the Flamingos, one of the most fantastic groups I've ever heard.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of mesmerized, just learning everything as much as you could, like a sponge.
Oh, big time. Yeah, it was quite the education, really fast. Just talk about being thrown into the fire. That was pretty much it.
So jazz was like right away, like your introduction to music and big band too. You were just kind of like this is, it wasn't until later, I'm sure, like you didn't start getting into the other genres like rock or pop or any of that stuff.
Yeah. I had friends, in my hometown they were in the rock band, and I was in the blues and R&B band actually, because we had horns and, it was very R&B oriented. And yeah, I grew up with that, with Earth, Wind and Fire and that kind of music. Didn't really get into the rock thing very much because it just wasn't my bag.
Sure.
But yeah, I didn't, the big band music and that stuff, I really didn't even get a clue as to what was going on with that until I was in Berklee and studying it and going, oh, now I see what they're doing. Okay. Yeah. But before that, I listened to it and I liked it. But yeah, I was a pop music freak, just like everybody else my age.
What were like some of the first records aside from the big band stuff that you recall, that this was like your first record that you ever bought? Like,
oh my gosh. I think the first ones that I really remember knocking me out were the Eagles. I loved them at the time. Earth, Wind and Fire. Boston, when they came out with their record Boston, that stuff, I was just like, wow, this is great.
More Than a Feeling, Amanda.
Yep, exactly. And then I remember this distinctly because on my 18th birthday, I was in Miami playing in a hotel with this band, with that guy's band. And for my birthday, he took me to a Gino Vanelli concert. I don't know if you know who Gino Vanelli is, but...
No, I don't know.
I went to that was the first concert that I'd gone to where I was completely mesmerized. I was so mesmerized that I remember that he had bought me 2 beers. he bought me 2 beers at the beginning of the show, and I still had a beer and a half left at the end of the show because I just couldn't take my eyes off the music and the guy. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that show changed my life.
That had to have been like some experience. Was this at a club or a bar? Or
he was performing at a highlight, which is like it's sort of a small sports place.
Sure.
Arena. I wouldn't call it an arena, but it was a fairly large place.
Yeah.
After hearing the music that I heard on stage that night, I knew that I wanted to go to school and go to Berklee at some time because I just knew that, I felt like my musical palette was so limited, being somewhat self-taught and very little, education in music before that. That was definitely a life changer for me.
You kind of alluded about this earlier. You were in bands growing up in school. Tell me about more of your experiences and some of the first teachers that you worked with.
First couple of teachers I had, it's interesting because it kind of came full circle. When I was 11 years old, my mother wanted me to take organ lessons.
Okay.
So she took me down to the piano organ store, and I got lessons from this guy that ended up being my piano teacher 5 years later. But he taught me how to play the organ, and I took lessons from him for a little while on the organ. I didn't really dig the organ very much because it was kind of like she wanted me to play in church, and I did not want to play in church.
Oh, that can be very nerve-wracking.
Yeah. And, the Catholic Church music wasn't exactly my kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I did it for a while to make her happy. And I was kind of like, yeah, this is okay. But nah, I don't want to do this.
Not your thing for a full-time gig.
No. So that's what I think I kind of started getting into sports more because that wasn't my thing. I had a couple of band directors because I did play saxophone. I did play trumpet a little bit in a marching drumline thing.
Yeah.
That was really fun. Drum and bugle corps, the Mark Twain Cadets from Elmira, New York. That was pretty neat. I did that, and then I got involved in. It was kind of an Up with People kind of group that we did, like we did Jesus Christ Superstar, we did Godspell, and that was really enlightening for me because I really enjoyed the stage theater part of it. That was neat.
You mentioned you played sports. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sports. I loved playing basketball. I grew up in a neighborhood with a bunch of guys that were all within probably 4 or 5 years. And I was the little guy. I was definitely the low on the totem pole. But I would, hang around with these older guys and they would let me play basketball, baseball, football, and whatever time of year it was, that was the sport we were playing. And they were really great because they definitely gave me a hard time, but it kind of helped me grow up to be maybe a little tougher. And, because they wouldn't put up with, me being young. They expected me to perform, on their level. And if I didn't, they would let me know about it.
It's like, it sounds like the music world and the sports world kind of go hand in hand because there's all this kind of discipline and takes so much stamina to work up to the level of a top athlete or a top musician. You have to be at your A game every time you're playing a show or playing a game of some kind.
It's true. It's very true. And to this day, I'm an avid tennis player. I just love to play tennis, and I would play every day if my body would let me. But it's just so much fun.
Definitely. We're kind of nearing the tail end of summer going into the fall, but I would not ask for any perfect weather other than what we have right here now, where I am here in Nashville, but I'm sure where you are, it's pretty nice outside, not as hot or humid. So definitely this is not a bad time to go out and play some tennis.
Absolutely. And like I said, I lived in Fargo for 3 years and I played indoors 5 days a week, every day, 5 days a week, all year long for 3 years, pretty much. Yeah, because we had indoor courts. It was great.
So tell me a little bit more about your first kind of influences. You mentioned big band and jazz. Tell me a bit about some of your influences as a musician when you started. The drummer that took me on the road when I was 17 years old, he turned me on to music that really put a fire under my butt. I remember him turning me on to oh my gosh, Frank Sinatra and, his big band stuff. He loved Frank. And then he turned me on to, what's his name? Al Jarreau. Yes.
I remember when I first heard Al Jarreau's live album in Europe, I was just blown away. Like, this guy's unbelievable. And to this day, I've just always loved Al Jarreau. I even did one of his songs in my senior recital at Berklee.
Oh,
I did Spain just because I always loved his version and scattered. It was so much fun.
What a voice!
Just incredible. Yeah, he was a big influence. And he turned me on to Gino Vanelli, who I'd never heard of. And then when I heard that stuff, I was just like, oh my, that's incredible. Yeah.
You kind of, we mentioned earlier about the big band and jazz stuff. When did you realize the jazz was like the genre of music you like to play a lot?
I think it had to do with, I studied classical piano a little bit with my teacher when I was 16 years old. He made me study some classical, mostly for technique, but also because I really enjoyed and loved some of the music, like Chopin and some of that stuff. I loved it, but the problem that I had with classical was that for me, it always felt like it had to be this certain way. Mm-hmm. I had to perform it this one way, and anything outside that was kind of like, Whereas jazz, I just love the freedom of, it was never the same.
Sure.
I might, today I'll sit down and play a song on my piano that I've been playing for the last 30 years.
Right now, let's kind of pause for a little bit and kind of segue into our next selection for this evening. This is from your brand new show, The Sins of the Father. We want to talk about that later on in the show. This is a selection called We Need It. What can you tell me about this piece here, Billy?
So this piece is sung by a woman in the show who is she's kind of like, how do I put this? She's religious. She's like the town mom. Like everyone goes to her. I'm sorry, I'm spacing on the name. She's not a birther, but what's that called when you go to a woman and she helps you birth your baby?
Oh, surrogate?
Thank you. She's the surrogate. She's like the town surrogate. Yeah. Almost like the town nurse, even though she's not really a nurse.
Yeah.
And she's really loved and everything. And this guy gets robbed of all his money, and he's really upset, and he can't believe it. He thinks the world has ended. And she goes to him, and she's trying to cheer him up. She brings him some shortbread cookies to cheer him up, and she sings this song for him to try to to tell
cheer
him,
hey,
if there's anything in the world that if it's good and it's in the world, we need it. And so that's what this song's about.
It's a good message. Well, we're going to play We Need It right here on the Piano Men. You're tuned to the Piano Men with Stanley Carr, chatting with Billy Kuttenkuler tonight about his illustrious career. And you mentioned it briefly earlier. You graduated and attended Berklee College of Music in Boston, Massachusetts, and got a bachelor's degree in jazz composition and arranging. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your time there, Billy? And do you have any memories that you care to share? Any professors that you worked with? Any pieces of advice that you got from them?
Berklee was the best thing I ever did. I loved Boston. I loved going to Berklee. Berklee was an absolute dream because there were so many different musicians from all over the world. And they may not even have spoken English, but when they sat down and played and you played with them or worked with them, music was your common language. And it really didn't matter that they couldn't speak English that well or whatever. It was amazing. Some of the stuff I would learn from somebody who just showed me something and I would just go, oh, that is so cool. And, I was really lucky at Berklee because I went in as a piano player. And it was funny because I had been working with Cher. Mm-hmm. And I knew that when I was working with Cher, it wasn't my favorite gig, musically speaking, because the music wasn't exactly my cup of tea. But I knew then that I wanted to go to Berklee, so I went and auditioned. And when I walked into the audition room and the guy looked at my resume, he said, wait a minute, you're 19 years old right now and you're working with Cher. He said, why do you want to come here? And I said, because I'm bored, to be honest with you. I love music, I love jazz, and I just want to learn as much as I can. And I know that I'm not going to do that playing with Cher. She was awesome, but my life needed to go in a different direction. And so I went to Berklee as a piano player. And as a piano player, I was way down in the bottom of the totem pole. There were guys there, they've been playing jazz since they were 3 years old. Yeah. I couldn't even walk in the same room with those guys. And it's so funny because I think it was my fourth semester, I was playing basketball at the YMCA, which I did on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And I tore the muscle in my hand. And I went to a surgeon and she said, well, you can't really use your right hand for at least 6 months. And I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do because I can't do school without my right hand on piano. Right. I'm going to fail. So, and I couldn't afford to do that. So I thought about it for a while. I went home and I actually told my father I was thinking about switching and leaving Berklee. Sure. And he was like, no, don't do that. Just go back and talk to them and see what you can do. And I was like, okay. So I went back and I'd done a bunch of singing, obviously, when I was there. And one of my instructors said, dude, just switch to the voice program. You'd be like, they'd love you. And I was like, well, all right. So I went to the voice department chairman and I auditioned for him and I scattered a song and he was like, you're in. And yeah, it was awesome because then as a singer, you know, I could sight read really well and harmonize and do whatever I needed to vocally. I was always felt really strong vocally, way stronger than singer as a keyboard player. And I switched over, and when I did switch over, I started getting all these ensembles that as a piano player, I would have never got. I started singing in the studio a lot, and that's when I met one of my teachers was a famous jingle writer, and he wrote all kinds of jingles, and he introduced me to the jingle singing business in Boston, and I started singing jingles in my junior year, and I was living high on the hog because I was making money.
Awesome.
Yeah, and yeah, it just kind of went from there. I started singing jingles and radio IDs. You know, I'd go and sing them 2-3 nights a week, and I'd make a bunch of money. And you know, my roommates in college, you know, they were eating ramen noodles, and I was going out to a restaurant. So it was worth every minute of switching.
Your voice was heard all over the city of Boston, Billy.
Yep. And then probably the funniest thing was, and you're probably too young to remember this, but the New England Patriots, when they were first in the Super Bowl with the Bears, the Chicago Bears, the Bears had this song about the fridge because there was this big guy who was on their team. And so the New England Patriots wanted to put out their version of a song for their team. And I sung it live in the studio with my teacher. And yeah, that was all over the United States. And that was my first, like, wow, that was really cool.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's just nuts.
Absolutely hilarious.
It was nuts. But I loved Boston. It was just great.
It's a big city. There's a lot to do. I've got family there. And I bet you that there was, like, everywhere you went at Berklee, you could hear musical sounds coming from all rooms, all places of the hallway.
Oh, constantly. And you could go almost 24 hours a day. Someone was practicing somewhere. You know, the piano rooms were almost never empty. Oh my gosh, you just walking in between classes, there'd be kids sitting on the sidewalk, you know, with a cup of coffee and they got their guitar out and they're just running through scales or playing tunes or jamming with, you know, some other guy who's banging on a drum or, you know, maybe banging on a box or a pot or anything, just making music. Yeah, it was just awesome. Music everywhere. It was just great.
Did you ever get a chance to play or go to any of the clubs while you're in Boston?
I did. It's funny. The first 4 semesters I was there, I was in a band. It was kind of rough because I joined them because I needed the money to pay for where I was living. Mm-hmm. So I was in this band and we played clubs all over New England. But the problem is that I would, you know, play after school. So we would play from 9 or 10 at night until 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning. And then I'd have to drive back to Boston or in Boston. And, you know, I would get up and have to get up for an 8 a.m., you know, class. Yeah. And it was rough because I remember, you know, I would start doing with 3 espressos just to try to get through class. And it got pretty bad. Oh yeah. So I ended up leaving that band because they just worked too much and they weren't in school, so they didn't have to do that. My other bandmates. And then after I switched and got into the voice department, I actually got in another band, but they only did originals and they only performed every once in a while at a club in Boston, and that was a great band. They were really fun.
What a great town! What a great musical town! Man, all kinds of stuff to do. And, you know, you also were a recipient of the Tony Bennett Jazz Master Scholarship Award. How did that make you feel getting that honor?
You know what? I got to tell you this story because it's very funny, actually. I was hurting for money. This was right before I started singing the jingles. Yeah. And my next door neighbor in the dorm when I was there the first year, I knew he was from Canada and he had a full ride. He was a great drummer, jazz drummer, amazing. And I said to him, man, I don't know if I can pull off next semester. I'm short on cash. And he's like, dude, you don't have a scholarship? And I was like, no. He goes, well, why not? I said, I don't know. He said, well, go ask for one. I said, you're kidding me. He said, no, just go to your voice department chairman and tell him you need to get a scholarship. I was like, man. Okay. So I went and asked, and he was like, you don't have a scholarship? I said, no. And he goes, well, you do now. So I ended up getting a full ride for my last 4 semesters, which was pretty awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
Yeah. And again, as a keyboard player, I would never have got that.
Wow.
They wouldn't have even blinked at me for that one. So, yeah, switching to that's funny, but basketball and, tearing my muscle in my hand was a blessing, huge blessing.
You just never say never, and you never know what can happen if you get a scholarship from Berklee.
Yep.
Or apply for a scholarship. The world can open up, and it can even be in your favor.
Yeah. I learned sometimes you just got to ask.
Yes.
Just put it out there and see what happens.
Yes. So right now, I'm going to throw out some names of some people you've worked with, and if you can, tell me a little bit about what it was like to work with them. We'll start with the Hudson Brothers.
Oh, my gosh. Those guys were like my big brothers. They pretty much took me under their wing and adopted me like their little brother, which was really cool because they were like Catholic boys that, were out in California doing really well for themselves. They had TV shows and records and things like that, and they were doing concerts. I was in a lounge at the Aladdin, used to be the Aladdin in Las Vegas, working with a band, and they were in the main showroom. And I remember they were with Lola Falana. They were opening up for her, and they came into the lounge to see us play, my band. And I remember going, oh, wow, that's the Hudson Brothers, and they left. And then they kept coming back.
Wow.
Yeah. So like the second or third night that they came back, the oldest brother came up to me and he said, hey, you ever think about coming to LA? And I was like, well, yeah, like all the time. And he said, well, if you come out, you can work with us and we'll help you out. We'll help you try to get a record deal and see what we can do for you. And I was like, oh my goodness. So that's how I met them. And I did. I ended up just saying, okay, that's it. I gave the band my notice like probably 2 or 3 weeks later, and I ended up moving out to LA. I hooked up with them. They put me to work on their films. I started playing with them in their band, which was really fun because they were it just felt so comfortable because not only were they into music and songwriting and the Beatles and stuff, but they were also heavily into sports. So, we'd be on the road playing in, Atlantic City or wherever. And then after the gig, we would
shoot a basketball or something.
Yeah, we'd go play basketball or baseball or something because they were very into sports too. So they were really great guys. They took me under their wing and they helped me out a lot. In fact, they hooked me up and with a guy that he kind of wanted to turn me into a teen idol. And I had the deal right in front of me, and I turned it down. I did. I turned it down. I was like, nope, that's not for me. I can't see myself doing that. So
save it for the next person.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cher.
So the Hudson Brothers introduced me to Cher's manager because they were great friends with him.
Okay.
And that's how I got the Cher gig is her keyboard player singer was leaving. Actually, he was just a keyboard player. He was leaving, and Billy Samuth, the manager, said, hey, this kid you got, Billy Kid, does he want to try out for Cher? I think he'd be great with the band. And I was like, oh, sure. So I went and auditioned for her and sang and played, and I got hired right off the bat. She was wonderful. I really loved working with her. But like I said, the show that she was doing at the time, the Las Vegas show, I don't know, it just wasn't, I didn't really enjoy that very much. I didn't enjoy the music very much. It was kind of boring for me.
Did she have a residency at the time in Las Vegas?
No, but she did have a residency, I think, at Caesar's Palace. So we would do we do like, 3 weeks in Vegas, and then we go up to Tahoe, and then we go to Atlantic City, and she'd just rotate. And it's so funny because I wasn't really happy, and I knew I wasn't really happy, but I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how to make the decision of, okay, now I'm going to go to Berklee. Mm-hmm. And as fate would have it, something happened that kind of made me make a decision, and that's that Cher was lifting weights in a gym. And she dropped a weight on her foot and broke a bone in her foot.
Ooh.
And she had to cancel the tour. So because she canceled the tour, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to be working for the next 3 months or more. Now is probably the time to make the jump to go to school. And that's when I pulled the trigger and said, okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Going to Berklee, going to Boston and audition and then see what happens. So that's how that happened.
Take it and run with it, man.
Yep.
And last but not least here, Barry Manilow.
Oh my goodness. So this was after Berklee. I'd moved back to Vegas and was working in a band with one of my ex-teachers from Berklee.
Okay.
And another funny story, I was at an old club that was called the Silver Slipper. And I was there during the graveyard shift playing from 11 at night until 3 or 4 in the morning. And it's pretty late one night, and I'm playing in there with my band, with my teacher's band. And these guys come in, and they look pretty lit, like they've been out drinking a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
They came in and
having some sips.
Yeah, and they were watching and enjoying the show. And then after the show, I go up to the bar to grab a cup of coffee or a Coke or something to try to stay awake. And these guys come up to me, and they're like, hey, man, we love your singing and you're playing. How about coming and auditioning for Barry Manilow in Los Angeles next week? And I was like, oh, come on, man. I thought they were yanking my chain.
Yeah, joking around.
I was like, yeah, let me buy you a beer and you can just leave me alone. And they said, no, we're serious. And I'm like, yeah, come on, man. And then it turns out they were serious. And they said, look, give me your number and we'll call you tomorrow and set you up with a guy who's going to give you the plane tickets and set it up for the audition. And I was like, all right, why not? So sure enough, I did. And I went in and auditioned for them as a keyboard player, singer. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get the gig. They were looking for 2 keyboard players, and I didn't actually get the gig. They gave it to another guy, a great keyboard player named Joey Melati. And so I went home. I was feeling kind of bummed, I didn't get it. And then literally the next day, the guy called me back up and he said, hey, you need to fly back in and sing for Barry. Apparently one of their backup singers was leaving, and they loved the way I sang. So they were like, we want you to come and audition as a backup singer, not as a keyboard player. And I was like, okay. So I flew back in, went right to the rehearsal with Barry. They threw me in immediately with a couple of the other singers, and we, sang a couple of background parts, and he hired me that day.
Wow.
Yeah. And then that was the start of a great, 6, almost 7-year relationship of working with him. And he's really quite the perfectionist musically. He's really great. I learned so much from him, and he was wonderful to me. He gave me opportunities. He let me open up his show sometimes with my stuff and in the sheds in the summertime. And he was really great. I learned so much from watching him. He would literally videotape the show every night, and watch it and take notes. And then he would, on the plane or the bus, he would say, hey, check this out. And he's like, see what's going on right there? And he's like, you're not doing this. If you did this, try this next time. And I would go, yeah, you're right. And he was always trying to improve and always making his show better. He was really quite great to work for.
And you got to play with him on Broadway too.
Right? Oh my gosh. Yeah. Almost 3 months on Broadway. That was just phenomenal. Are you kidding me? I mean, living in New York and being on Broadway and getting paid, that was just like, wow.
That's like a dream come true for any musician that's into that whole musical theater aspect of it. And I know you've been a huge musical theater fan. Tell me, but did you ever do any acting while you were in school, Billy?
I did some acting when I was really young. I had the lead in the play musical, and when I was in junior high school. I did a little bit in elementary school. I was in something, I can't remember. It was some Santa Claus Christmas thing.
Yeah.
at the Catholic school, but
that's funny.
Yeah, but and then when I got to high school, like I said, I didn't get along with high school very well.
Yeah,
just me and high school didn't get along, and so I didn't do any theater really in high school.
So, Billy, tell me about this next selection from your latest in your new musical. This is called If This Is the Last Thing I Do. That's the name of this next selection.
Okay, so this is a very emotionally charged moment in the show where a young woman who is a bit of a laudanum, which is kind of like it's an opiate. She's an addict, and she drinks a lot. She has a really small child who's 7 years old, and she's walking through a very cold winter night, going to this mansion of a rich man and his son. And she's going to tell the rich squire that his son is actually her husband, and
wow.
that this child is actually his grandchild, because he doesn't know that. And the son has been paying her off to keep her away. And he struggles. Through bad circumstances, he ends up running out of money, and she's getting mad. So she's going to go and spoil the party. He has a New Year's Eve party, and she's going to go to the party and let everybody know that this guy's a jerk, and he's really, So she's on her way there, and it's a brutal blizzard. It's really cold, and she's not that far away, but she stops in the cold, and she takes a little laudanum sip, and she said she needs to rest for a second, and she sings this song, and it literally is the last thing that she does, because after she sings it, she sits down, and then that's the end for her. Yeah.
Well, we're going to play If It's the Last Thing I Do right here on The Piano Men. And we're back on The Piano Men, talking with pianist, vocalist, and composer Billy Kuttenkuler on the show tonight. And you were telling me earlier you were living in Los Angeles, and in 1994, you relocated and moved to Nashville after spending some time in L.A. Tell me about how what made you want to move to Nashville?
Well, actually, the earthquake.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah, the earthquake in 94 in Northridge, it rocked our house pretty bad. We were renting at the time, thank goodness. And I had just gotten back that night, the night before the earthquake, at like 7 o'clock from a tour in Europe, in England. I'd just gotten back home, and my two sons were, less than a year old and 1.5 maybe. And the earthquake rocked us big time. My wife at the time never went back in the house again. You
eventually got the job at Currey Ingram, and that's where we first met. And I had you as my choir teacher for 7th grade, and that was a lot of fun.
Yep. And that's where I got into the theater thing even more, because I was lucky enough to get hooked up with Mike Dominguez, the theater director. And he was talking about doing musicals, but we didn't have enough people in the school to fill an orchestra. So he was like, how can we do this? And I said, well, I can do tracks. I'll do tracks for the music. And he was like, no way. I'm like, yeah. So I remember having a meeting with him and the powers that be there at the time. And I said, yeah, I'll do tracks for you for this time. I'll do it for free. Free of charge, just to show you what can be done, what I could do in the future. And, we could do musicals here if you wanted to do that. And we did The Wizard of Oz, and it was a success, and they were blown away that you could actually pull off a musical. So I ended up doing, oh my gosh, I don't know how many musicals. We did Annie, we did Pippin, we did Wizard of Oz, we did The Sound of Music. And then Sean Kelly, he was into the video thing. So then at some point we said, hey, we're doing musicals, why don't we try doing a movie? And they were like, can you score a movie? And I was like, sure, I'll score a movie. That'd be awesome. So then we did 3 movies in my time there at Currey Ingram. And it was so much fun for me, because I'd never really gotten the chance to score a whole film before. And It was a great opportunity. It was really, really fun.
It's one of the cool things about going to a school like Berklee is you could learn all this stuff about playing music and film scoring, and you take that knowledge and just apply it anywhere you go. And so it just goes to show you just never know where this could lead you. And you created such a unique program using technology with GarageBand and all these different things. That had to have been an amazing feeling to be able to do that while you were there.
It was really fun because I remember when I first got there, and I remember talking to a few of the upper echelon about the music program. And I said, so you're either in band or choir. Is there any other choice? And they said, no. And I said, well, what if the student's not really into singing and they're not really into playing an instrument? What then? And they go, well, that's all they got. And I said, okay, well, what about music technology? What about, learning how to use GarageBand? And, because GarageBand's amazing for a free program. It's amazing what you can do. It's incredible.
Definitely.
So then I created a whole music technology class that, gave kids another choice in music. And it was very successful. And I had a really great time teaching it. It was really fun.
Yeah, no doubt. Yep. So over the years, I've got to know you and your family. I know your son, Sam, who I've had the pleasure of working with at Jam. Is there anybody else in your family that plays music that you've kind of showed him the ropes?
Oh, my both boys, my youngest son, Tommy, he was the soccer player. He loves music and listens to it all the time. And he plays a little bit of guitar, but nothing serious. And then Sammy, he played bass and guitar and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. He did a little touring with a couple of country artists. And I think he got the bug when he toured with a couple of those groups, but then he realized that, hey, when I'm not on the road, I'm not making any money. So yeah, I think he started to realize that it wasn't, it's hard because, you might have one gig this month, but where's the next one? And then it's just.
You're now in Indiana after spending some time in North Dakota. You worked for the Fargo-Moorhead Community Theater. What can you tell me about your experiences there?
Oh, that was 3 years it was kind of tough because when I first got there, I got hired to music direct A Christmas Carol, the show. And it was unique because basically the director, she was wonderful. And she asked me to do my own arrangements. And of course, everything was, to be tracked. So I did MIDI stuff. Everything was all MIDI. There was nothing live.
Yeah.
But I did my own arrangements of all these Christmas songs. And it was really fun because some of them were really big orchestrated things, and then some of them were really kind of poppy cool. And I had free reign to do what I liked. And she was really great about, if I came up with something that wasn't quite right, she'd go, nah, I don't think so. And then I'd usually give her like three options and go, well, what if it sounded like this? And then she'd go, oh, I love that. And then that's where I would go. But it was really great. And then COVID hit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And, the bottom dropped out and I didn't work for, 6 months to a year. And then she didn't want to not work. So I ended up music directing kids masked. Everybody was masked and everybody had their temperature taken. And we did the Addams Family. We had 5 casts all at the same time, rotating, throughout the day. Like Monday was cast 1 and 2, Tuesday was 3 and 4, the next day was 5 and 1, and so on forth and so on. Anyway, but we did videos of the show. Mm-hmm. So that they could, send it to their parents and the grandparents and blah, blah, blah. So there was never a live show. But we kept, theater going by doing that. Mm-hmm. And then things started to get better with COVID. And I music directed, 9 to 5, which was really great.
Oh, and, Dolly Parton. That's a classic.
Yep, Little Shop of Horrors. Mm. And then I did another one, All Shook Up, the Elvis thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That had to have been very frustrating for you. I know a lot of people, I know COVID definitely threw a wrench in everybody's plans. So,
oh man, and it was brutal on the cast because we had one show. Well, it was 9 to 5. You know, we'd worked on 9 to 5 for almost 2.5 months, and we were ready to do the show. And literally 3 days before we were supposed to open, the lead guy got COVID.
Wow! Whoa!
And we had to cancel like the whole first week. And then 4 days after he got it, he'd given it to the female co-star, and he was okay. It didn't really even bother him all that much, but he was sick, but he wasn't sick.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, she got knocked for a loop, and she was really bad. And they actually had to like cancel it and then move the show from beginning of June to the end of July. And so they did the show. I wasn't even there.
Nobody knew about the virus at the time when this stuff started. So
yeah, it was a drag.
Crazy,
because you did all that work and so much time and effort went into the show, and it was so great, and we couldn't wait to get it on, and then just the rug pulled out from.
You got a new musical coming out called The Sins of the Father. What can you tell me about this musical?
Oh my gosh! So when I left Nashville, my wife was going to be traveling a lot for the next 5 to 6 years. I knew that. So I decided to go with her and travel. So the first place we went to for a year was Puerto Rico. We lived in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And while I was there, I was reading a lot of the classic novels I always wanted to read. And I read this book called Silas Marner by George Eliot. And after doing musicals at Currey Ingram, I always threatened, like, man, it'd kind of be fun to write a musical. I don't know how to do it, but it'd be kind of fun. And so I thought about this book, and I was like, man, it would be really cool. And so I started researching about what do I do to write a musical? And I came across a YouTube video of Stephen Sondheim. Mm-hmm. And somebody had asked him in an interview with students somewhere in New York City, said, Mr. Sondheim, what's the best way to learn how to write a musical? He laughed and he said, write a musical. And he's so right, because I didn't know what I was doing. I just started. Yeah. I just said, okay, here's what I would do if I were doing it. And I mapped out the book, and into chapters, which became like, scenes. And then I decided which ones would come, which ones would go, and where songs would be appropriate. And then I started writing songs like a madman. And, I think I wrote like 30, probably about 25 songs altogether. Some of them made the cut. Some of them didn't. Most of them did. After I wrote the music, it's funny because I wrote the music first. And then I tried to tackle the script. I think in the back of my mind, I was hoping that I would meet somebody that would say, hey, I'll write the script. And that never happened, of course. So then I had to write the script myself and adapt it from the novel. And that was, for me, quite the eye-opening experience. And
challenging one, too.
It was really challenging, way more difficult for me than writing the music.
Sure.
6 years later, we did a staged read-through in Fargo right before I left, and it was just wonderful to see it come to life on stage for the first time, and to see audience and hear their reaction to things. And it was really great because, when you live with it inside your head, it's one thing. And then you start, doubting and second guessing, and but when you actually see it on stage, it's so clear, like, oh, that's awesome. And then, you have your moments of, that's not so awesome. And then you can at least go in and then you tweak it, and then you start changing things that weren't working so great. Sure. And, so it's really close. I'm thrilled to say that I think the musical is really close to being finished, and I can't wait to finish it, so that I can send it out and to production companies and theater groups and see if I can get someone interested in actually doing a real production of it. I would just love that, and I see that happening in the near future. So,
well, what can you tell me about what advice would you give to someone who wants to pursue music? And do you feel the business has changed at all since?
Well, it's changed dramatically. I think how I survived was I was flexible and willing to do other things, not just, for instance, when I was on tour with Manilow, a young guy who was a tech at the time, he carried around one of those Apple SE30 computers. And he was doing some sequencing and things on his computer in his hotel room. And I was like, dude, that is so cool. And I bought a computer, and then I started doing that. And that's how I learned how to sequence and to do MIDI stuff. And, then I started writing songs like that. And I was just, and then I got into music notation with like Finale and things like that. So all these things, different things that I kept doing in the music world, they all led to some income source from somewhere. And I think today's music it's hard because music has been devaluated so much that you got to do more than one thing. If you're lucky, great. But if, you're not, then if you want to stay in music, you really got to try to do as much as you can.
Any emails or anything that people can find you to contact you more about the musical or? Yeah,
on my website. Yeah, they can contact me on the website, and then I can answer you quickly through that. And that's the best way. And I update that fairly regularly, especially if I know something's coming up.
And that's BillyKidMusic.com?
Yep, 2 Ds.
Okay.
Billy Kid, Kidd, music.com.
Well, thank you, Billy. It's been a pleasure, and you can come back on anytime. Thank you for tuning into the Piano Men, and we will see you back here next week for our big 6th year anniversary show.